Hey, aloha, and welcome to the Gacha Guide. If you want to know if a servant is good enough to spend your hard-earned quartz on, you're in the right place. Today's topic servant is the Queen of the Beach, Summer Medb. We will be covering all these points that you see on screen, so let's jump right into her stats to start us off. So, Summer Medb is a 4-star single-target saber-class servant, meaning that she is strong against lancers and weak to archers. She has 8,017 attack at level 80, and this is the second lowest 4-star saber attack in the entire game, with the only lower being on Saber Lily, who's barely even a 4-star. Her HP at 80 is 13,609, which is the second highest 4-star saber HP, only second to Siegfried. Her hidden stats show us that her NP charge on attack is 0.72%, which is fairly above average, not bad at all. And as for her cards, her Quick does 4 hits, her Arts does 2 hits, her Buster does 2 hits, and her Extra does 5 hits. Relatively average hit count, so while she has that higher NP charge rate on attack, her hit count isn't really helping her all that much. Her star weight, aka how much priority she has on getting stars over other servants, is 104. This is around the exact average, so nothing special there. Her star creation rate is 10%, pretty much also around the exact average. So her stats are nothing to really write home about, but let's check her deck in MP. Her deck contains 1 quick card, 2 arts cards, and 2 buster cards. A standard 2/1/2 deck. Her noble phantasm, One Shot, My Love, My Dear Summer Tryst, is a single target arts noble phantasm with 6 hits. It will deal damage to the enemy, and every time it hits, it has a chance to inflict a 10% defense down debuff on the enemy you're attacking, with up to 5 maximum stats. The chance to apply that defense down is based on your overcharge, starting at 60% chance per hit, all the way up to 100% chance if you can get that 500% overcharge. This is honestly a pretty lackluster MP. At maximum potential, it is a normal damaging NP that can inflict 50% defense down. The defense down is nice, but the fact that it's not guaranteed to inflict even 1 defense down is rough, and if an enemy has any sort of debuff resistance on them, then that chance goes down even further. Let's check her passives. Her passives are very simple. She only has Magic Resistance B+, increasing her debuff resist by 18%, and Riding A, increasing her quick performance by 10%. Both of these are fairly weak for her. Riding is usually pretty good, but she has only 1 quick card to work with, so this is mostly a pretty useless passive, and Magic Resistance, who cares, honestly. Moving on, let's check her skills. First off, we have If I Change into My Swimsuit. This is a skill that gives her 2 buffs that last 3 turns each. First is an MP regeneration buff, which will charge her MP between 10 to 20% each turn. And next is a critical star regeneration buff, which will give her critical stars between 5 to 10 each turn. This is a fairly good buff to have on effectively only a 3-turn cooldown, so this is a pretty darn good skill. Not bad at all. Alright, moving on, we have Eau de Toilette, White Honey. This starts with a 60% chance to charm all enemies for 1 turn, and further applies a Arts Resistance debuff to them for 3 turns between 10 to 20% on a 7-turn cooldown. This is honestly pretty unimpressive. Not only is a 20% debuff on just Arts unimpressive due to the fact that there are servants that have 20% overall attack buffs or higher overall team card buffs, it is further marred by the fact that this is yet another debuff skill that can be resisted by debuff resistance or even just the natural resistance that servants come with. This is not a guaranteed thing to apply. I've had it resist on me many times on JP. On top of that, the charm doesn't scale anywhere past 60%, so the charm chance is pretty low, all things considered, at all times. This can be a skill that does absolutely nothing, or it can be a skill that does something okay. Finally, her last skill, Discipline of the Queen, Ocean. This is a charisma buff that increases the party's attack between 10 to 20% for 3 turns, and increases the party's critical damage 20 to 30% for 3 turns, except for herself. She does not get hit by that critical damage up. This is another skill that honestly just feels lackluster. She's a damage dealer herself. Missing out on this critical buff is really painful for her. It makes the skill fall really flat for herself, and it makes it seem like they're setting her up for a support, but she has a damage-dealing Noble Phantasm. So it's like they're trying to make her into some half-and-half support / damage dealer, and she fails on both fronts due to it. Now, if you do want to get Summer Medb, what skills do we need to level these up? Well, the bad news just keeps flowing with Summer Medb, as these are pretty rough to level. We have the requirements of 8 Primordial Lanugos, 12 Shells of Reminiscence, 20 Aurora Steels, and 20 Permafrost Ice Crystals for each level. Both the Aurora Steels and the Permafrost Ice Crystals are new materials, and very few people will probably have had the time to farm these up by now. Especially if you were going for any of the other servants that required any of this. Unless you were saving specifically for Summer Medb, it's very unlikely you have the materials necessary for this. So trying to justify them for Summer Medb especially is hard. In total, to max out her skills, you need 24 Lanugos, 36 Shells, 60 Steels, and 60 Ice Crystals. That is painful. So how does Summer Medb stack up to her competition? Well, as you may have been hearing my tone in how I've been talking about it, not very well. As a single target 4-star Saber, her main competition is Rama, Saber Lancelot, Brave Ellie-chan, Summer Fran, and Yagyu Munenori. Unfortunately for Summer Medb, her performance is overall quite poor. The only servant here that she has any chance of beating out is Brave Ellie-chan, who is, at the very base, a welfare servant guaranteed to be NP5. So she probably won't even beat her out, in most cases. Every other Saber she's directly competing with is far and above better than her. She really falls flat by comparison. Her damage is poor, her skills are easily resistible by enemies, and she doesn't really fit a niche or anything like that. In my personal opinion, Summer Medb is quite weak. She's an attack-oriented servant with party-oriented, more support-like buffs that don't all affect or benefit for her. On top of that, her MP debuff is inflicted through multiple hits. Any enemy with debuff resistance greatly reduces that effectiveness. Overall, she just plain feels weak. But, as I've always said, you roll with your heart, not for gameplay. So if you roll for Summer Medb, what skills should you prioritize in leveling? I would suggest her first skill as the top priority. As I've said before, MP generation on demand is always good to have. I would then follow it with her third skill, as it is a guaranteed damage buff for the party and always going to affect everyone. Her second skill can have a pretty okay effect, but the only thing that gets raised is the arts resistance and the cooldown reduction. And both of those can be resisted. Both the charm and the arts resistance can be resisted. So overall, this skill is honestly her weakest skill in most cases. So I would save that one for last. This is a servant where you kind of have to raise her skills to a pretty decent level for them to have much effect in the first place. So at the end of the day, if you want to use her, you're going to have to be raising those skills pretty high level, if not full level. But I would suggest this order if materials are tight for you. Now, as for craft essences to equip her with, she has 2 styles to her, either as a damage dealer or as a more semi-support style. If you want to be a damage dealer, focus on NP damage and arts up are the main things for her to have. So Painting Summer, which is a CE from this event, is a very good one to choose. 10% arts up, 10% MP gen up, and 50% starting MP. Dive to Blue from the last summer is also quite good. 10% arts up, 10% MP damage up, and 50% MP starting charge. The Black Grail is always fantastic. It gives her NP a much-needed damage boost with an 80% NP damage up. And Fragment of 2030 helps her support a bit with further star generation to mix with her first skill, getting her 8 stars at non-max limit break and 10 stars at max limit break. Also, the Black Grail is 60% MP damage up at non-max limit break, just to point that out. These are the CEs I would most suggest on her. Even the fast NPCEs, while I always keep those up because they are important for a lot of servants, I think Summer Mev's damage output is just not high enough to really suggest taking either of those on her. But they're there in case you want to. As for servants to pair her with, oh look, Waver. Waver with his 50% MP charge, attack up, critical damage up, defense up, a no-brainer, always good to have. She's an art servant, so Tamamo no Mae is our premier art supporter and a fantastic support to help Summer Mev out. She has 3 turns of 50% arts up, which helps her out quite a lot. I would also suggest for you to not have Summer Mev as your only damage dealer, so I would say to use her kind of as a setup, semi-damage, and to help buff other servants that are better at damage, and 2 fantastic Saber servants that are both art servants and fit in the same niche as her are Saber Lancelot and Yagyu Munenori. They are both extremely good at outputting damage. They both benefit quite a bit from the arts resist down and from the critical damage up that Mev can provide for them. So these 2 I would suggest as main damage dealers, with Summer Mev being a semi-support to pump a little bit of damage and set them up for success. Quick Too Long Didn't Watch, she's honestly not a good role. She's weak overall. She's a damage dealer with poor self buffs. She's more party focused on that kind of AoE setup as opposed to setting herself up. Some of her buffs don't hit herself, some of her debuffs can be resisted pretty easily, and often enough, they just won't apply, especially against some of the more difficult fights out there, which you would want her to succeed at as a single target servant. Even if you do hit everything, every single debuff, every single buff, everything's set up for her perfectly, her damage output is honestly not great, and her buffs and debuffs are nothing special. But hey, you know, if you really need a good reason to roll for her, at the very least, she'll probably sit on you if you ask. So let me know your opinions on Summer Mev, and if you enjoyed this video, check out my Twitch channel, all that jazz. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Good luck rolling.